The galaxy had been quiet for 10,000 years. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of fear. The quiet of creatures who had forgotten how to speak up, how to say no, how to stand tall. It was the quiet of a billion worlds held under one shadow. The Velta ruled everything. They were tall beings, almost 3 meters high, with pale gray skin and 4 long arms. Their eyes were dark and empty, like holes cut into their faces. They did not smile. They did not laugh. They simply existed, and they expected everyone else to exist beneath them. Their empire was called the Galactic Dominion, and it stretched across 100,000 star systems. Every planet that held life, every moon where creatures built cities, every station floating in the darkness of space, all of it belonged to the Velta. All of it had surrendered. Commander Rova stood on the bridge of his flagship, the eternal silence, and looked out at the stars. He was old by Velta standards, nearly 400 years, and he had served the Dominion his entire life. He had watched species after species join the Empire. He had never seen one refuse, because no one ever refused. The mathematics were simple. The Dominion had billions of warships. Their technology could bend space and time. Their weapons could crack planets like eggs. When a new species was discovered, the Dominion would send a greeting fleet, usually a few hundred ships, sometimes a few thousand. The new species would look at those ships, do the calculations, and understand that fighting was pointless. Then they would kneel. The Renari had knelt. They were small, gentle creatures with soft fur and large eyes. They had built beautiful cities and created wonderful art. When the Dominion came, they looked at the warships filling their sky and surrendered within 1 hour. That was 8,000 years ago. Now they worked in Dominion factories, their art forgotten, their songs silenced. The ocean had knelt. They were farmers, peaceful beings who lived on ocean worlds and grew food in the warm waters. The Dominion took their planets and their harvests. The ocean now fed the empire that had stolen their freedom. The Tuvin had knelt. They were brilliant engineers, builders of magnificent machines. The Dominion saw their talent and put them to work building warships. For 6,000 years, the Tuvin had constructed the very fleet that kept them enslaved. Every species had a similar story. Some had considered fighting. A few had even prepared weapons. But when they saw the size of the Dominion fleet, when they understood the scale of what they faced, they all made the same choice. They chose to live as servants rather than die as fighters. Commander Rova did not think this was cruel. He thought it was logical. Why would anyone choose death when life was offered? Yes, that life meant serving the Dominion. Yes, it meant giving up freedom. But it was still life. It was still existence. Surely that was better than nothing. He had never understood the concept of fighting for something greater than survival. On a small farming world called Helenfor, an old Renari named Goss sat with the children of his village. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The children gathered around him, as they did every evening, waiting for his stories. Goss was very old, one of the oldest Renari alive. He remembered things that others had forgotten. He remembered the time before the Dominion, when his people had been free. He remembered their songs, their dances, the way they had celebrated the harvest under 3 moons. But he never told the children about fighting back. He never spoke of resistance. "Tell us about the old days," a young Renari named Pip asked. Her fur was still soft with youth, her eyes still bright with hope. Goss smiled sadly. "The old days were different," he said. "We had our own world then. We made our own choices. But that was before the Dominion came. Why did our people not fight?" Another child asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Goss had asked himself the same thing for 8,000 years. Why had they not fought? Why had no one ever fought? Because fighting would have meant dying, Goss said finally. The Dominion does not kill those who surrender. They simply own them. And being owned is not so terrible, little ones. We have food. We have shelter. We have each other. But even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow in his mouth. He had said them so many times that he almost believed them. Almost. The children nodded and accepted his answer, as children always did. They had never known anything different. To them, the Dominion was like the sky or the ground, simply part of reality, unchangeable and eternal. That night, Goss sat alone and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Dominion ships patrolled the darkness. Somewhere out there, Commander Rova sat on his throne of power, confident that no one would ever challenge him, and Goss wondered, as he had wondered for thousands of years, if there was anyone in the universe brave enough or foolish enough to say no. He did not know that his answer was already on its way that far across the galaxy. In a region of space the Dominion had not yet explored, a small blue planet circled a yellow sun. The beings who lived there called their world Earth. They were young by galactic standards. Having only recently discovered how to travel between stars, they were also different from every other species the Dominion had encountered. Throughout their history, humans had faced impossible odds. They had fought wars against enemies that outnumbered them. They had stood against tyrants who seemed unbeatable. They had died by the millions for ideas for freedom, for dignity, for the simple right to choose their own path. They had a word that no other species in the galaxy seemed to understand. That word was defiance. And now, after years of building, planning, and dreaming, humanity's first true starship was ready to launch. It was called the Horizon, and it carried 200 brave souls into the unknown. None of them knew what waited for them in the darkness between stars. None of them knew about the Dominion, or the Velta, or the countless species that had surrendered without a fight. But they were about to find out, and when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. The silent galaxy was about to hear a new sound, the sound of a species that refused to be silent. The Horizon had been traveling for 6 years, 6 years of darkness, 6 years of cold space, 6 years of hope and fear mixed together like water and oil. The crew of 200 had left behind everything they knew, their families, their homes, their entire world for the chance to find something new. Captain Park June stood on the bridge and watched the stars through the main window. He was 52 years old, with gray hair at his temples and calm eyes that had seen many things. Before becoming an explorer, he had been a naval commander. He had led ships through storms. He had made hard decisions when lives hung in the balance. He was not a man who scared easily, but even he felt nervous today. Their sensors had detected something, signals, transmissions, signs of intelligent life. After 6 years of searching, they had finally found what they were looking for. Lieutenant Kim Hanna walked up to stand beside him. She was young, only 28, with sharp eyes and quick thoughts. She had grown up in a coastal city called Bizon, where she spent her childhood reading old history books about wars and heroes. She knew more about human battles than anyone else on the ship. "The signals are getting stronger," she said. "Whatever is out there, it is big." "How big?" Park June asked. Before Hannah could answer, the ship shook. Not from damage, but from something else. Space itself seemed to bend around them. Then suddenly, they were not alone. Ships appeared. Hundreds of them. They came out of nowhere, folding space like paper, surrounding the tiny human vessel in seconds. Each ship was massive, at least 10 times the size of the Horizon. Their metal was dark, their design sharp and threatening. The crew stared in shock. Some held their breath. Others whispered prayers. Park June did not move. He simply looked at the fleet that surrounded them and waited. The communication screen flickered. Then a face appeared, if it could be called a face. Pale gray skin, 4 arms, dark, empty eyes. A Velta. Commander Rova looked at the small human ship with curiosity. It was so tiny, so fragile. The beings inside must be primitive, he thought. Simple creatures taking their first steps into the stars. They would be easy to add to the Dominion. He spoke the words he had spoken to countless species before. Attention, unknown vessel. You have entered Dominion space. I am Commander Rova, High Overseer of the Galactic Dominion. You will submit to our authority. You will register your species. You will surrender your homeworld's coordinates. Resistance is mathematically impossible. The message was translated and played on the Horizon's bridge. Everyone heard it. Everyone understood what it meant. Surrender, give up, become slaves. The crew looked at Captain Park June. What would he do? What could he do? 300 warships surrounded them. Any one of those ships could destroy the Horizon in seconds. The mathematics were clear. They had no chance. Lieutenant Hana spoke first. They want us to give them Earth? That is what they are saying, Park June replied. Have they ever actually fought anyone? Park June studied the ships around them. They were big and impressive, but he noticed something strange. Their formation was ceremonial, not tactical. They were arranged for show, not for battle. They floated in perfect lines, as if posing for a picture. I do not think so, he said slowly. I do not think anyone has ever said no to them. Hannah laughed a short, surprised sound. So they have all this power, but they have never used. It? They just scare people into getting up? It seems that way. The crew was silent. On the screen, Commander Rova waited for the expected answer. Every species gave the same answer. It was only a matter of time. Park June thought about Earth. He thought about his daughter, who was probably a teenager now. He thought about the mountains and oceans, the cities and villages, the billions of people who had no idea what was happening out here in the darkness. He thought about human history. All the wars, all the struggles, all the times his people had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. The ancient warriors who had defended their land. The soldiers who had fought against armies that outnumbered them. The ordinary people who had stood up to tyrants and said, no more. Humans had never been good at surrendering. Park June opened the channel. His voice was calm and steady. This is Captain Park June of the Earth vessel Horizon. We have received your message. We need to discuss this further. On the Dominion flagship, Commander Rova blinked. His 4 arms twitched in confusion. He looked at his officers, who looked back at him with the same puzzled expression. Discuss? Rova repeated. What is there to discuss? Submit or be destroyed. Those are the only options. But the human had not submitted. He had not screamed in fear. He had not begged for mercy. He had simply asked for more time. It was the first time in 3,000 years that anyone had said anything other than yes. Rova did not know what to do. There was no protocol for this. No procedure. In all the history of the Dominion, no species had ever asked to discuss their submission. After a long moment, he made a decision. We will give you time, he said. 1 solar year to come to the logical conclusion. Use this time wisely. When the year ends, you will submit your coordinates, or we will find Earth ourselves. And if we must find it ourselves, we will not be gentle. The transmission ended. The Dominion ships began to pull back, forming a ring around the human vessel, but no longer closing in. On the Horizon's bridge, the crew exhaled. They had expected death. Instead, they had received 1 year. What now? Lieutenant Hana asked. Captain Park June turned to face his crew. These were the first humans to encounter alien life. These were the first humans to face the reality of a hostile galaxy. And now, these were the first humans who had to decide, would humanity surrender like everyone else? Or would they do what humans had always done? Now, Park Jun said, we go home. We tell Earth what we found, and we prepare for the fight of our lives. You think we can win? A young officer asked. His voice was shaking. Park Jun looked out at the massive Dominion ships. So powerful, so intimidating, but also so certain, so unprepared for anyone who might push back. I think, he said slowly, that they have never faced anyone willing to lose everything for the chance to be free. They do not understand sacrifice. They do not understand courage. And they do not understand humans. He sat back in his captain's chair and gave the order. Take us home. We have a war to prepare for. The horizon turned toward distant Earth, carrying with it news that would change everything. The galaxy was not empty. It was ruled by tyrants. And humanity had 1 year to decide whether to kneel or stand. Everyone who knew humans could have told the Dominion what that choice would be. But the Dominion did not know humans. Not yet. They were about to learn. The horizon returned to Earth on a cold winter morning. Captain Park Jun had sent messages ahead, but nothing could have prepared the world for what he brought home. Video recordings of the Dominion fleet. Translations of Commander Rova's demands. Evidence that humanity was not alone in the universe and that their neighbors wanted to enslave them. Within hours, every government on Earth knew the truth. Within days, every person on the planet had seen the footage. The Velta ships filled screens in homes and offices and schools. People watched those dark vessels surrounding the tiny horizon, and they felt fear, but they also felt something else. Something that began small and grew with each passing day. They felt anger. General Yu Tae was 68 years old when he was chosen to lead the United Planetary Defense Council. He had spent his life studying war, every battle, every strategy, every victory and defeat in human history. He had written books about ancient generals and modern commanders. He understood how wars were won and lost. Now he would have to use everything he knew. The council met in a secure building deep underground. Representatives from every nation sat around a massive table, looking at screens filled with data about the Dominion. The numbers were terrifying. Billions of ships, thousands of conquered worlds, an empire that had stood for 10,000 years without ever losing. They want us to surrender, one representative said. Maybe we should. Maybe it is better to live as servants than die as fighters. They would take everything from us, another replied. Our freedom, our future. Our children's children would grow up as slaves. General Yu raised his hand, and the room fell silent. He stood slowly, his old bones aching, and walked to the front of the room. On the screen behind him, Dominion warships floated in perfect formation. Let me tell you what I see, he said. I see ships that have never been tested. I see formations designed for parades, not battles. I see an enemy that has won every war without fighting, because no one has ever fought back. He pointed at the screen. Look at their positions. Look at their spacing. These are not the tactics of warriors. These are the tactics of bullies who have never been punched in the face. The room was silent. People leaned forward, listening. They have numbers, General Yu continued. They have technology, but they do not have experience. They have never had to adapt to an enemy who strikes first. They have never had to react to surprise. They have never bled. He turned to face the council directly. I am not saying we can win easily. I am saying we can win, but only if we commit everything. Only if we fight with everything we have. Dr. Beek Sumi spoke next. She was the council's chief weapons scientist, a small woman with glasses and brilliant eyes. She had spent the last 3 months studying every piece of information the horizon had brought back. "The general is right," she said. "Their shields operate on predictable patterns. Once you understand the pattern, you can break through. Their ships are large but slow. They are built to intimidate, not to chase. Our smaller, faster vessels could run circles around them." She pressed a button, and the screen showed detailed diagrams. "Their communication systems are centralized. If we destroy a fleet's command ship, the other ships become confused. They are not trained to think independently. They wait for orders that never come. But their numbers," someone interrupted. "They have billions of ships. We have ... what? A few hundred at most?" "Numbers are not everything," General Yu said. "In human history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones many times. With the right strategy, with the right courage, with the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory." The debate continued for days. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to hide Earth's location and hope the Dominion never found them. But slowly, as more people studied the evidence, a different feeling began to spread. Maybe they could fight. Maybe they should fight. Maybe, after all the thousands of species that had surrendered, it was time for someone to stand up. Across Earth, something remarkable happened. Countries that had argued for generations now worked together. Factories that had built cars and phones started building weapons and ships. Scientists who had competed for prizes now shared their research freely. Young people lined up by the millions to join the military. Not an old grandmother in a small Korean village donated her life savings to the war effort. A child in Brazil gave his toy robots to be melted down for metal. A factory worker in Germany worked double shifts without extra pay. A farmer in Kenya converted his fields to grow fuel crops for starships. Everyone had something to give. And everyone gave it. Park Jun, now promoted to admiral, worked with General Yu and Dr. Beek to design new warships. They were smaller than Dominion vessels, but much faster. They were armed with weapons specifically designed to break Dominion shields. They were crewed by humans who had trained their whole lives for this moment. The year passed quickly. Too quickly. On the last day, as the sun set over Earth, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of humanity's new flagship. The Soul. It was not as large as a Dominion warship, but it was beautiful and deadly, and crewed by people ready to die for their world. He opened a channel to the Dominion. Commander Rova's face appeared on the screen, confident and calm. He expected the answer he always received. He expected surrender. Admiral Park spoke clearly. His words broadcast to every human on Earth and every Dominion ship in range. "This is Admiral Park Jun of the Human Defense Force. We have received your ultimatum. We have considered your offer, and we have reached our decision." He paused. Billions of humans held their breath. "Earth declines your offer. We will not submit. We will not register. We will not surrender our home or our freedom. We are not like the species you have conquered before. We do not kneel. We do not beg. We do not accept slavery." Commander Rova's expression changed. Confusion, disbelief. He could not understand what he was hearing. Admiral Park continued, "If you come for our world, we will fight you. We will hurt you. We will make you pay for every step you take toward our home. And even if we lose, even if you destroy us all, we will show the galaxy something it has forgotten, that tyrants can be challenged, that empires can fall, that freedom is worth dying for." He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "We are humans, and humans do not kneel." The transmission ended. Across Earth, people cheered and cried and hugged each other. Across the Dominion, enslaved species watched the message in secret and whispered words they had not dared to speak in thousands of years. Hope, courage, defiance. On the Dominion flagship, Commander Rova sat in stunned silence. In 10,000 years, no one had ever said no. No one had ever spoken to the Dominion with such disrespect. No one had ever threatened to fight. "Prepare the invasion fleet," he said finally. "These humans must be taught their place." He did not understand what he was about to face. He did not know that the mathematics of war included factors he had never calculated, factors like courage, sacrifice, and the will to fight against impossible odds. The Dominion had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. But fear only worked on those who were afraid, and humans had decided not to be afraid anymore. The war was about to begin. The Dominion First Fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of Earth's solar system. 10,000 ships, each one massive and dark, spreading across the void like a plague of metal and fire. Commander Rova watched from his flagship with cold satisfaction. This would be a lesson. This would show the galaxy what happened to species that dared to say no. He expected the humans to be waiting with their surrender. He expected them to see his fleet and understand their mistake. He expected this to be over quickly. He was wrong about everything. Admiral Omino stood on the bridge of the battleship Inchin, watching the Dominion ships appear on his screens. He was 45 years old, a calm man with steady hands and a mind built for war. He had studied every battle in human history and every piece of information about Dominion tactics. He knew exactly what the enemy expected. And he planned to give them something different. The human 7th Battle Group had only 400 ships. They were small compared to the Dominion vessels' fast, agile craft designed for speed rather than size. To the Dominion sensors, they probably looked like insects facing giants. But these insects had teeth. "All ships." "Report status," Admiral O said. "Green across the board." His first officer replied, "The crews are ready. Weapons are hot. Good." Admiral O looked at the thousands of enemy ships arranging themselves in their traditional formation, a slow, ceremonial approach designed to display power and inspire fear. They moved like a parade, not an army. They had never faced an enemy willing to meet them head-on. Today, that changed. "All ships," Admiral O announced, his voice carrying to every vessel in the fleet. "Attack formation. We go in fast and hard. Target their command ships and engine sections. Make them bleed." The Dominion expected the humans to wait, to tremble, to reconsider. Instead, 400 human ships accelerated directly toward 10,000 enemies. On the Dominion flagship, officers stared at their screens in confusion. "Commander," one said, "the humans are attacking." "Impossible," Rova replied. "They have 400 ships. We have 10,000. They cannot be so foolish." But the humans kept coming. They flew in loose formations, weaving and spinning, moving in ways the Dominion ships could not match. The Velta had never needed to be fast. They had never needed to chase prey. Their weapons were designed for slow, steady destruction of static targets. Lieutenant Cha Yuna led the 3rd Strike Squadron, 12 small fighters loaded with experimental torpedoes. She was 31 years old, a pilot since she was 18, and she had dreamed her whole life of flying among the stars. She never imagined her first real space mission would be flying into the heart of an enemy fleet. "Stay tight," she told her squadron. "Follow my lead." "We're going for their flagship." They dove into the Dominion formation like needles through cloth. Velta gunners tried to track them, but the human ships were too fast, too unpredictable. They jinked and rolled, using maneuvers that the Dominion had never seen, because no one had ever been desperate enough or brave enough to try them. Yuna's squadron reached the flagship in under 3 minutes. Their torpedoes launched in perfect sequence, designed by Dr. Beek Sumi to bypass Dominion shields. The explosions lit up the darkness like new stars. When the light faded, the flagship's bridge was gone. Commander Rova had survived, protected deep inside the ship, but his command center was destroyed. Communications went dead. Thousands of Dominion ships suddenly found themselves without orders. They did not know what to do. Across the battle, human ships exploited the chaos. Admiral O had divided his fleet into strike groups, each with specific targets. They hit engine sections, crippling ships that could not chase them. They destroyed communication arrays, leaving vessels isolated and confused. They attacked fuel stores, creating explosions that damaged ships nearby. The Dominion had never trained for this. Their tactics assumed an enemy that would face them directly, allow themselves to be surrounded, and then surrender. They had no procedures for an enemy that attacked from all angles, that retreated and struck again, that refused to stay in one place long enough to be targeted. Pilot Kang Junho, only 23 years old, flew his fighter between two Dominion cruisers, drawing their fire toward each other. The cruisers' weapons hit their own ally, creating a chain reaction that destroyed all three ships. Junho escaped through the debris, laughing and crying at the same time. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Dominion had lost 3,000 ships. Some were destroyed completely. Others drifted helpless, their engines dead, their crews unable to coordinate. The remaining vessels retreated into fold space, fleeing from an enemy that was supposed to be inferior. Humanity had lost 89 ships. Nearly 1,000 brave men and women died in the darkness, their bodies forever floating among the stars. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten, but they had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. Admiral O sat back in his chair, exhausted beyond words. His hands were shaking. He had just commanded the first real battle against an enemy that had never been defeated, and he had given humanity something it desperately needed. Hope. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Smuggled recordings showed human ships tearing through Dominion formations. Whispered messages told of the great fleet that had been humiliated by a species no one had ever heard of, on the farming world of Helenfor. The old Renari named Goss watched the footage with tears in his eyes. For 8,000 years, he had believed that resistance was impossible. For 8,000 years, he had told children that the Dominion could not be challenged. He had been wrong. They fight, he whispered, his voice breaking. They actually fight. Around him, other Renari gathered. They watched the human ships darting and spinning, attacking without fear. They saw Dominion vessels exploding, Dominion formations crumbling. They witnessed something that had not happened in 10,000 years. The Dominion had lost. If they can fight, a young Renari said, maybe we can too. Goss looked at the young one, at the fire in his eyes, and remembered what that fire felt like. He had felt it once, long ago, before hope died. Now it was being reborn. On the Dominion homeworld, Commander Rova stood before the High Council. His flagship was damaged. His fleet was broken. And for the first time in his life, he felt something he did not recognize: fear. These humans, a council member said, they are different. They are primitive. Rova replied, but his voice lacked conviction. They were lucky. We will crush them. You said they would surrender. You said they would not fight. You were wrong. Rova had no answer. He had been wrong. Everything he knew about the galaxy, everything he believed about how species behaved, had been proven false by a small blue planet that refused to kneel. Send more ships, he said finally. Send everything. They cannot defeat the full might of the Dominion. But even as he spoke, he wondered. He wondered if perhaps, after 10,000 years of easy victories, the Dominion had forgotten how to truly fight. He wondered if an empire built on fear could survive against an enemy that was not afraid. He wondered if the humans were just the beginning, Far away, on their small blue world, humans celebrated their victory. But Admiral O and General U knew the truth. This was only the first battle. The Dominion would return with more ships, more weapons, more fury. The war was just beginning. And somewhere in the galaxy, other enslaved species were watching, waiting, starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could fight too. The humans had lit a match. Soon, the whole galaxy would burn. The war lasted 7 years. 7 years of blood and fire and sacrifice. 7 years of battles across 1,000 star systems. 7 years of hope and despair, of victories and losses, of moments that would become legends, passed down through generations. And humanity did not fight alone. It began on Helen 4, 3 months after the first battle. The old Renari named Goss stood before his village and spoke words that had not been spoken in 8,000 years. Our ancestors surrendered because they thought they had no choice, he said. But the humans have shown us the truth. There is always a choice. We can live on our knees, or we can die on our feet. And I choose to stand. The Renari uprising spread like wildfire. Across 12 colony worlds, the small, gentle creatures who had been slaves for millennia picked up tools and weapons and fought back. They were not warriors. They did not know how to fight. Many of them died in those first desperate days, but they did not stop. The ocean joined next. The peaceful farmers who had fed the Dominion for 6,000 years stopped harvesting. They destroyed their own crops rather than let them feed their masters. When Dominion soldiers came to punish them, the ocean fought back with farming tools and bare hands. Then came the Tuvin. The brilliant engineers who had built the Dominion's warships began to sabotage them instead. Ships launched with faulty engines. Weapons misfired. Navigation systems sent fleets into empty space or toward danger. For every warship the Dominion built, 3 others broke down. Captain Shin Do-yon led the first joint human-Renari assault. He was 29 years old, the grandson of refugees who had fled war on Earth decades ago. He understood what it meant to fight for freedom, to sacrifice everything for the chance of a better future. The target was Korvex Station, the Dominion's largest shipyard. 100,000 workers labored there, building the vessels that would carry the Dominion's power across the galaxy. If it fell, the Dominion would lose 1/3 of its manufacturing capacity in a single night. "This is crazy," his Renari second-in-command said. "The station is heavily defended. We have 50 ships. They have 500. Then we will have to be fast and clever," Do-yon replied. "The Dominion expects us to be afraid. They expect us to hesitate. We will not give them time to react." The assault came without warning. Human and Renari ships struck from 3 directions at once, overwhelming the station's defenses through sheer speed and ferocity. Do-yon's ship was hit 4 times during the attack. Half his crew died. But he kept fighting, kept pushing, until the station's core exploded in a flash of light visible from 3 star systems away. Commander Jang Nari developed new tactics. She was 38 years old, one of the finest military minds humanity had ever produced. She studied the Dominion's weaknesses and found ways to exploit them. Her greatest innovation was the swarm doctrine. Instead of large warships, she designed thousands of small, cheap drones. They were expendable, replaceable, and overwhelming. Dominion point defenses could destroy dozens of them, but hundreds more would get through. They could not fight swarms, because swarms had no center, no command ship to target. At the Battle of Vos 7, Nari's swarms faced a Dominion fleet of 8,000 ships. The drones attacked from every direction, slipping through shields, striking at weak points, creating chaos where the Dominion expected order. By the battle's end, 2,000 Dominion vessels had been destroyed or disabled. Nari lost her left arm when her command ship was hit by debris. She commanded the rest of the battle from a hospital bed, giving orders while doctors worked to save her life. "You should rest," a medic told her. "I will rest when we are free," she replied. General Yu. Tay was 75 years old when he planned the final assault. Cancer was eating through his body. He knew he would not live to see the war's end, but he was determined to see the path to victory before he died. He gathered his staff in the underground command center and studied the maps one final time. The Dominion homeworld, the heart of the Empire, the place where Commander Rova and the High Council still believed they could win. "We hit them here," Yute said, pointing to the planet's orbital defense platforms. "We neutralize the platforms, then we land troops on the surface. We take the Council alive, if possible. We end this war. It will cost many lives," an officer said. "Yes," Yute agreed. "It will. But if we do not end this now, the war will continue for decades. More lives will be lost. We must pay the price today to save our children tomorrow." He looked at his staff, young men and women who would lead the assault he would never see. "I will not live to see freedom," he said softly, "but I will live long enough to know it is coming. Make me proud." He died 3 weeks later in his sleep, with maps of Dominion Prime spread across his bed. The siege of Dominion Prime lasted 40 days. Admiral Park Jun, now 63 years old, led the assault. His hair had turned completely gray during the war. He had lost friends, crewmates, and pieces of his own soul in 7 years of fighting. But he had never stopped. He had never surrendered. The human fleet, joined by Renari and Ocean and Tuvine vessels, broke through the orbital defenses on the 7th day. Ground troops landed on the 9th day. The fighting in the streets of the Dominion capital lasted another month. Lieutenant Sha Yuna died on the 38th day, leading a fighter assault against the last defense tower protecting the council building. Her ship was hit by 3 missiles. She could have ejected. Instead, she aimed her burning vessel directly at the tower and destroyed it with her own death. She was 38 years old. She had flown more combat missions than any pilot in human history. And in the end, she gave everything she had. On the 40th day, Commander Rova surrendered. He came aboard the human flagship Sol with his 4 arms hanging at his sides. His dark eyes were empty, not with their usual coldness, but with defeat. He had never imagined this moment. He had never believed it possible. Admiral Park Jun faced him in the ship's main hall. Around them stood officers from every species that had fought for freedom: humans, Renari, Ocean, Tuvine. Together, they had done what no one had done in 10,000 years. They had beaten the unbeatable. "Why?" Rova asked, his voice hollow. "Why did you fight when no one else would? You could have submitted. You could have lived peacefully under our rule, like everyone else. Why did you choose war?" Admiral Park looked at the alien who had ruled a galaxy through fear. He thought about all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made, all the pain and blood and tears that had brought them to this moment. "Because we are human," he said, "and humans do not kneel." The Dominion collapsed within a year. 10,000 years of empire, undone by a single species that refused to do what every other species had done. On the newly liberated world of Helen IV, the old Renari named Goss built a statue. He was very old now, his fur gray and thin, but his eyes were bright with joy he had never expected to feel. The statue depicted a human woman standing with her fist raised against the stars. It was Lieutenant Sha Yuna, the pilot who had given her life in the final battle. Around the base, Goss carved words in both Renari and Korean. They taught us that the impossible was possible, that the unconquerable could be conquered, that freedom is not given, it is taken. Across the galaxy, children of 100 species grew up hearing stories of the humans. The strange, stubborn creatures from a small blue world who looked at an invincible empire and said, "No God." And when those children asked why the humans fought, their parents told them the truth, because someone had to. And humanity decided that someone would be them. Admiral Park Jun lived for another 20 years. He spent that time helping rebuild the galaxy, creating alliances between species that had never worked together before. He visited Helen 4 once and stood before Yuna's statue with tears in his eyes. "We did it," he whispered to her memory. "We actually did it. The galaxy was free. The silence had been broken. And on every world, in every language, the story was told. The story of the humans who fought. The humans who bled. The humans who refused to surrender. The humans who changed everything.